Hi everyone, welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube, you can find out more about us at officehours.global. First hour is generally some general discussions about media and virtual production. The second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today we're going to talk about surround sound. The timing is oddly opportune, given that Logic just dropped with surround support for Atmos, and so we'll take advantage of that and talk a little bit about surround. Tomorrow and Friday, we're going to change things up a little bit. So I didn't get it quite out in the preview today, but it'll go out tomorrow. But tomorrow we're going to, and Wednesday and Friday, we're going to do some brainstorming together around Office Hours 2.0. So Andy and Jonathan are coming out next week. We're going to talk about, we are going to talk about super sources like we talked about, but we're going to talk about what we want on those super sources and what do we think we like. And we will cover a little bit, we will look at some super sources tomorrow and think about it and talk about what we like and don't like, but really in relationship to what we want to see in a super source from Office Hours 2.0. Friday, we'll talk more about that as well. So we're going to continue that conversation. We're now going into kind of the mode. So we're going to be filling up a lot of next week talking about 2.0. Andy will be out here. We'll be kind of working through that. So that'll be Wednesday and Friday. On Thursday, we'll be talking about hosting and just really some brainstorming about what it does and how, at least how I approach it and how some of the other folks here that host things approach hosting. And then Saturday, of course, education in the morning. We don't broadcast that. You'll need to come to Zoom. And then in after hours, or actually in its own link, we'll be returning to the Belfast method, but we're going to Todd Reynolds' house at noon on Saturday, Pacific Standard Time. So stay tuned for that. All right. Now we're going to jump into the questions. Courtney, what do we have?
All right, starting things off, we have from TJ Asher in Minneapolis, Minnesota, who is excited about the new Apple Silicon and who ordered new computers yesterday.
Go ahead, Jason.
Oh yeah, yesterday was a very expensive day. I think all things said about $4,600, and I can't wait.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Well, the prices are still out of range of 90% of the planet, maybe even more. The potential for the processor and the GPU, especially the multiples, processors in there for doing H.264 and ProRes conversion, that is going to speak volumes to streaming over the next 12 months. What I would like to see, though, is a betting pool. It was less than 7 days before we saw Windows 10 or Windows 11 on the M1. So how long this time around?
Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, I bought one, bought everything maxed out except for the hard drive. I went for 2 terabyte. And I'm excited to see what it does. And I might have to buy a second one because my lady is doing V-Ray renders. And about a month or so ago, they have an M1 version. So if she starts moving my computer, she might need another one. So
I think looking at the stats, we'll see what happens. If she sees the computer running capable of running V-Ray, I think she'll be on it. I think that one of the challenges for the industry as a whole is that Apple's now in a position that I think it will take the industry a decade to catch up, and they're going to keep on releasing. But my guess is that we'll see a new set of chips once a year, that are dramatically better than the ones before. And I think if we just saw the jump between the M1 and the new M1s, if we see that jump every time for a couple of years, there's not going to be anything in the same space, even at the same price. So I think that from a performance perspective, as creative professionals, Stuart's absolutely right that a lot of people aren't going to be able to buy these, but as a creative professional who this is a tool and we need it to run as fast as we can, I think that it's going to be very hard for other platforms to keep up with this level of acceleration, because everyone else has been kind of topped off for a little while, and suddenly Apple's doing a hockey stick when everyone else doesn't know where else to go. So Charles?
yeah, so the one thing that I'm going to find very interesting for a lot of content creators is now they're going to have a pretty good HDR monitor to create and view things, that it's going to be up to Apple standards. So the colors are going to be pretty good, right? But for the price, it's going to be fabulous. Right? So for like $2,000, you get a small HDR monitor. It's going to have, I don't know how many zones, but it's going to be pretty nice. I think it's a 8 point something zones per square inch. So it's still something that you will notice, which I'm sure there's going to be some talk about the zoning, because it was the same thing with the iPad Pro when that came out. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. Like, I want to see how that propels things moving forward now that a lot of people are going to have a very good standard HDR monitor.
And we want to keep on watching is this unified memory architecture, which is really the thing that takes it to a whole different level. Is that a lot of times in the past we've had silos of the GPU and the CPU, and they have their own memory, and they have to keep on doubling up that memory, and then they have to use slower buses to get between each other, and so they're constantly doubling up a lot of things where they don't have to do that anymore. And I think that that's the thing that we're going to see. So now whoever needs that RAM, gets it. And that's a pretty profound change, in efficiency, and that's why most of the benchmarks that are out there are probably not going to be super accurate. You're going to have to look at, for quite some time, I think you're going to have to look at what does your application do to it. Like how does your application interact with this, and how efficiently is it written to metal? I think that even if Windows is running on the problem really is that even though Windows might be able to get it onto the chip, they need the OS to take full advantage of the hardware. So you can get it running, but the question is, can you get it running well? And I think that'll be very challenging for any kind of platform to try to jump onto this hardware. Really, that's the tricky part of this, is that Apple has the IDE, they have they have all of the bits and pieces that they need to pull this all together. So with Xcode, with the libraries, with the hardware, and even the software. So I think that's going to be a really difficult process for other folks to compete with. And so again, as I've said before, Apple's number one competitor at this point is antitrust, because they're accelerating at the level that you would see with the startup, except that they have the weight of one of the largest companies in the world, and that will terrify a lot of people, and it probably should scare them a little. That they're in a growth phase when they should be in a leveling off phase. Next question.
All right, this one comes in all the way from Bad Herrenalb, Germany, from Fred Eric Eckert. Could the panel please discuss yesterday's Apple event regarding the production quality of the event and its impact on the future of digital-first events?
Well, everybody jumping into this, so I'll start with that. I think it's probably technically and creatively one of the best keynotes I've seen. I think that they took it to an entirely different level. If you actually watched it with an AirPod Max on or in a surround environment, it was a master's course in it's the future of how will you do these keynotes and take advantage of the added color space and added audio space. I think that the color, it looked bright. I don't know if it was HDR or not, to be honest. They didn't do a lot of things that pushed it that hard, but the audio was amazing. So you could hear them speaking in the center. You could hear a lot of the audio design going in different parts around you. And then in addition to that, they just keep adding the production value to it. So it's hard. It's going to be hard for a lot of other companies to justify spending the kind of money that I'm sure that they're spending. Someone asked me to guess, how much they spent on that production, and I was like, probably about $15 million. This my guess is about what that production cost to do. When you think about the weight of it, you think about COVID restrictions. When you think about all the graphics and everything else, that's and done at that level. Probably somewhere between 10 and 15 million is probably what I would guess. So so we have to kind of keep that in mind too when we do our events that are $30,000 or $100,000 or $150,000. It's a different. They're in a different part of the atmosphere. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, it was incredibly succinct. It was incredibly brief, but they keep getting better at compacting and presenting in a way that. Truly, I watched it again after the after hours, and not a single word was out of place. Not a single graphic was out of place. Nothing could be removed or added to to kind of take without taking away from the whole thing, which is the very definition of a solid presentation.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I thought it was very well produced. We did get to see behind this kind of a little effects breakdown in some of those transitions, so that you see the actual 3D construction of that lab that they're walking around in. And I think Tim was a man outstanding in his field, and he's probably going to get a call from the Cupertino Fire Department about watering that dry grass, because it's a great fire hazard.
I think it's actually designed that way. I mean, I think the grass is, I think it's watered. My guess is it's probably watered exactly as much as it's supposed to be watered. I bet you the irrigation there is. I bet you every tree is irrigated on its
Looks
own.
like a fire hazard to me.
Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I was not seeing a Dolby Digital stream come through. I think what most people were hearing was the built-in spatial audio emulation that's done within iOS 15 and macOS Monterey devices.
Well, that's impressive if it was. Like it was. I will say that it sounded really good. It definitely sounded like more than stereo. So that's an interesting. But yeah, the Apple does have its own virtualization related to that. Go ahead, Stuart.
Just the presentation. Ignore all the stuff that we all do behind the scenes. The way the people spoke, it was like listening to a marketing department. It wasn't like listening to somebody who was involved in the creation of the tools. Compare and contrast to Grant Preddy when he's doing a Blackmagic thing. You can listen to Grant and you can actually believe he knows what he's talking about. The rest, they sounded like they were from the marketing department, not from the technical department. And I think perhaps it loses a little bit of impact because of it.
But I think I don't know when it's ever been not that way. Like with Apple events, it's always been pretty processed as far as that goes. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I was actually, for a little while, I was walking around with the iPad because I was going back and forth between the 3D printer and that. And there was points where I kept the tablet here and then walked back there. And it was just so crazy that, this person was floating around in my head with and without the iPad from a distance. It was just wild. I don't think I watched it as much as I listened to it. And that's a big game changer. Now, I did talk to somebody else, and they said it was a little distracting because they have inner ear issues. Mm-hmm. So I can see a problem with some people having issues with that. And it would have been nice if they would have been able to flatten it out through the iPad if that's how they're listening. But other than that, I thought it was just remarkable on the audio end of things.
Yeah, it was directional. I mean, so if I had my headphones on and I turned to one side or the other, it was definitely placing that in space. And usually that's a telltale sign that it's not just stereo, but it may have been their virtualization to it. So it depends on, I think that I'll do some more digging to figure that out. But I will say, as far as the second part of the question as to what is the impact on the future of digital production, I think that Apple, probably more than anyone else, is going to sell the idea that you don't need to put people on stage. It is going 4 or 5 times faster now through the content than they were on stage. And you don't have those uncomfortable moments. I mean, people get to have their best take every single time. So all these presenters get to do that rather than having to suddenly, a lot of these presenters only present when they do this. They now have a handful of people shooting a video of them where they get to do it over and over and over again until they get it right, and they cut between the best takes and everything else. On stage, they suddenly have to walk out in front of 1,000 people. They've got adrenaline. They've got all kinds of other things that are connected to it, and they do not generally produce a better event. That doesn't usually elicit a better performance on stage for someone who's just getting started. And it's an incredible pressure to put on a lot of their presenters is to, hey, you don't do this all the time. I'm now going to put you in front of millions and millions of people all at once live. No pressure to go. So I think that's really not a great place to put a lot of people. And I don't think many people, I'll be honest, other than Steve, I don't think Steve, and maybe a handful of other people on stage did it very well for Apple. And so it was always felt really stale to me, or static or forced. And I feel like it does feel to as Stuart said, much more, it feels very produced, but it doesn't feel as forced and uncomfortable as most of theirs did. And as the vast majority of keynotes feel. when you have executives up there, I think that most of them aren't very good at that. I think that the exceptions are Grant Petty and Elon Musk. I love watching Elon Musk as well. Same thing that Stuart talked about. It's a geek on stage, just talking. You never know what's going to come out. More than Grant, you never know what's going to come out of his mouth. Like with Elon, he's probably going to say something he shouldn't have. The window's going to break. So there's a level of excitement that they bring to it, but I don't think that that's easily reproducible. And so I think when you can't reproduce that, what you do is you make it look a lot greater. I think that what we're going to see, my guess is when we get out of COVID, I think that what you'll end up seeing is that Apple will have Tim or somebody else do stage announces where they just, here's the next thing, and then they go to a video, and isn't that great? And then they go to the video, and they go to that, or they're going to have the press come in, they're going to play them a movie that they play us, and then they're going to let them go out and play with the stuff, because the press doesn't care. Like, the press doesn't care whether they're on stage or not. Give us the information, but most importantly, give us access to Apple employees and gear. That's what they want. I mean, that's why they come to Cupertino, is to have that first access, not to watch the stage thing. They just put up with that. Like, that's, and they put up with that to get the swag and to be at the campus and to get access to the hardware and to be able to ask questions. And so Apple doesn't really need to use that stage for that. And hopefully they'll understand that. And I think that they're going to have a hard time. Every version of this that they get better, you feel like they can't go back. And if they can't go back, the problem is every other company pays attention to what Apple does. So that's the other issue. I'll go with Jeffrey.
You did that again.
What did I do?
I will say that 15 million is a Monday for Apple. So.
Sorry, say that again. You did that again. 15. I don't understand.
You did. No. You did. You called me twice, and I don't know why.
Because you popped in at the bottom. So okay.
But I will say the 15 million is a Monday for Apple.
Okay.
For budget.
Oh yeah. Next question.
Okay, this one comes in from frequent contributor Douglas Carmichael. What mics would you suggest for stereo audience ambience to use for a broadcast stream or mix?
Go ahead, Mickey.
I'd say, hey, it depends on the size of the venue and also how large the crowd. I'd probably rely on primarily an MS mic because that would allow me to adjust the width and post. Multiple MS mics, at least two, and also some AB spaced pairs for capturing a bit wider of a perspective. And all of those, the spaced pairs would be hypercardioids or supercardioids, depending on how far I can get them away from the PA system, and also always pointed away from the PA.
Next question.
From our panelist, Mitch Hill from Wilmington, Delaware. How about some tips in how to communicate with millennials? They are very smart, but have a devastating lack of experience.
I go ahead, Jason.
I have to say once again, devastating lack of experience was called out before the show, and what a great turn of phrase. Yes, they do, and at one point you did too. Well, the difference is that you didn't grow up at a time when every piece of information that all of humanity has had from the beginning of time onwards was available in your pocket. They don't have time for anything other than exactly what they're there for. So I think the best way to reach millennials is to tell them why they care.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Just imagine for a second what it was like when you were the same age as a millennial and the issues you had talking to your parents or your grandparents. And think about what your grandparents did to be able to talk to you. I mean, for example, my grandmother lived through 2 world wars. I can't relate to that. Millennials can't relate to even the things that we went through for our age group watching the moon landing. They think it was faked. So just use those techniques, but do it in reverse, because now you are the adult or the grandparent, and you've got to take the time to listen and see what they're actually saying.
Go, Charles.
So some of the stuff that we've done for the junior people is try to understand if they're coming to you for an internship, that means they do have some sort of a passion for what it is that you do. So nowadays, the younger generations, if they have an interest in something, it'll take them 0.2 seconds to get on YouTube and start learning about that thing. Now, to get up to the higher levels, then they might want to work at, it's like a post-production facility or a company that does that thing. So they should come to you with some understanding of what it is that you do and what they are trying to get to do. And at that point, you just give them small projects, and you have to just watch everybody, let's say on a one-by-one basis. Everybody is going to learn differently, because some are going to be able to work individually and some will need a bit more guidance. But if they show that interest, that's going to be the main factor. If they do have that innate passion or interest in that subject, they will find their way. That's just a human trait.
Go ahead, Kenneth.
Some time ago, there was a fellow named Dale Carnegie. He wrote a book about how to win friends and influence people. And the thing that I remember from his book is be lavish in your approbation and hearty in your praise, which means say that you're happy with the way the guy did the thing if he did it right, and correct gently if not, but always appreciate the work that they do.
Mitchell?
Absolutely, and all great advice. The phenomenon that I notice a lot of times, of course, is the same thing that my father used to tell me about how things were when he was a kid, and I agree with that. The problem I'm having communicating is the best practices that some of us take for granted, that goes back to being partially tradition and how things were done, and also how things are done today. And the general frustration factor lies in the fact that most of the people I connect with in that age group want to find out for themselves. And it's very frustrating when you realize if you only knew what I know today, you could do it so much easier.
When I think I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again because I think it's useful. When I was at a wedding, my uncle was sitting next to a stove. We were in the kitchen having drinks, talking, and his daughter walked in. She was probably 3 years old, and she wanted to touch this soup pot that was hot. And he grabbed onto her hand and he said, the pot is hot. It will burn you if you touch it. And she ran off. She was upset, she's crying. And then he went to the sink, got some water, put some ice in it. And he just kept talking, just kept on nursing that glass of water while we were all talking. She came back in. He didn't even look at her. He just kept on talking to us. And she reached up towards the pot. He didn't look at her again either. He just kept on drinking. Then she touched the pot. It was really hot. And she screamed at the top of her lungs. And he grabbed onto her hand and shoved it in the water and looked at her and said, the pot is hot. It will burn you if you touch it. And then he just let her leave with the thing. And he looked back at us and he goes, there's two things that you'll learn from that. Number one is that don't touch the pot again. But number two is Dad might have some useful things to say, and he's not going to protect you from yourself, And so he was a good engineer of working with people in general. But that was a lesson that I keep in mind a lot, which is that people have the only way to really learn is to fail. And I think that we really live in this world where we try to not fail at all, not ever fail. But most of us failed our way to where we are. Hopefully they're small failures. They're not catastrophic failures. But the only way to learn, like when you work out, if you ever work out, you don't grow unless you're failing. Like unless you get to a point where you can't lift that weight any longer, and your body's like, I can't do that anymore. Other than that, the body doesn't do anything. It's like, oh, I got this handled. So you have to figure out ways to put people in a position where they can fail without it being fatal. And in our case, that might be, failing, in a small, not in a small way where we can pick it up, or there's a little, but they got to have that stress response, to be available. And that can be internal projects where they fail, internal, like we use a lot of projects. We use projects here where we can fail, and we fail here. And so failure is a really, really important thing. What they bring is a new set of eyes that we don't have, and we have, from the day we're born, we start making decisions about what we don't want to pay attention to. When we're born, the reason our babies look at us like the big wide eyes is they're paying attention to everything. And over time we go, okay, I don't need to pay attention to that. I don't need to pay attention to that. This doesn't work. I'm not going to do that anymore. This doesn't work. I'm not going to do that anymore. And we slowly, and as we get older, we just have a lot of things that we've decided aren't working. New eyes will go down new paths that no one ever thought was possible, because the world that those new eyes live in isn't the same as the one where we made the decision not to go down that path. When I was in Photoshop, when I learned Photoshop, I did crazy things. I made all kinds of mistakes with it. I was an intern getting paid, $3.75 an hour for Prime Sports Network. I was supposed to be, doing other things. And I was basically taking the work from Cytex operators in the early 90s. And I failed. I failed for months before I started succeeding. And then I still failed every once in a while. But I did things and I figured out things. Like when I had left Prime Sports Network, they handed it back to the ad agency that I had taken the work from in the first place. And they couldn't understand how to even, when I handed back, I can do an ad. And this was before like the internet was the internet. I had figured out how to put all the images that I use in Prime Sports Network at all of the I can't think what they're called. All the places that you print, like high-end ads, service bureaus. So all the service bureaus that I had at every newspaper in every city and every service bureau and every newspaper that I served, I had all of my images on their servers. Then I only had to send them Quark files, which I could send them quickly, and I could do all the layouts, and I had built all these templates for it. So if they said I want to do an ad somewhere, I could have it. They could tell me at 10 o'clock in the morning, and in the evening paper it would be in it. And in 1991 or 1992, that was a big deal. And so when I handed it back, now I didn't know that was hard. I didn't know it was possible. It was just like, well, I can move this to this, I can move this to this, I can move this to this, and I just started building that, and from new eyes. And so when I handed it back to an old ad agency, they were overwhelmed. Like how are we supposed to do this? So the thing is that what we want to do as folks that have been doing this for a long time is also learn from the folks that are like, let them run, and figure it out and put the ad stuff in where we think when they get run into something, we can say, well, we might want to look at this, this, and this. But not tell them what they can and can't do, because that's the real value they have in the company, is that new blood that I'm going to go around. And a lot of times that's not going to succeed. And you do want to build a culture of when it matters, we're not going to take any chances. Like that's a culture that you just have to, but we want to find places where it doesn't matter and we can take lots of chances. But they are the kind of the key to the operation, for a lot of things. And we're constantly bringing new people in, figuring out, letting them run with it and figure stuff out that's never been done before. Like the stuff that Chris Fritchie just did that we'll get to show you on the 3rd. So we're going to show it to you on the 3rd of November. Chris figured out a new pipeline that I don't think that anybody's figured out in 3D on how to do stuff, because he just, he was new eyes, and I'm just going to keep figuring it out and determination. So anyway, next question.
Another one from Douglas Carmichael. I've heard that the ATEM Mini crushes the blacks of sources going through. Is this true, and how can you compensate for it?
Go ahead, Rupert.
So we quite often see the ATEM connected via USB to Zoom, and I haven't had a conclusive answer as to where the crushing of the blacks comes in. A lot of people say it's Zoom. Some people say it's the USB webcam output of the ATEM specifically. But either way, I mean, one way would be to monitor your final output. If you're going out to Zoom or out to YouTube, look at your image there and then, shade your cameras accordingly. But I've heard another way some people have sometimes tried is to come out of the ATEM via HDMI into a separate capture device, like a cam link or something like that, and then tune that to suit. And I think some people have also seen, doing a side-by-side comparison, that there is a difference there too between the USB and the HDMI output.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I've got them both hooked up, same device. So this one that says 1 is a capture card with pass-through, and then this one here is the Blackmagic, and you can see there is a little bit of a gamma shift. And I actually let you, so here's the scopes on 1. This is uncolor corrected, nothing's going on. And then here's the Blackmagic, and you can see it's about the same. And if you wanted to, if you did see that it was overly crushed, it would look more something like that, it would be, you can see what's happening if you've never seen it before. And to compensate, you would just, either change your exposure, or you can use some of these tools. And this isn't a Blackmagic camera, so I'm not using there's no controls on the camera control right now. But this is what you would do, is you would just go in and start to adjust it. But from what I can tell, It's, if anything, it looks milkier. It's not crushing. It's milkier.
Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, so what I've seen is that it does really depend on your pipeline. So that's something that you have to just be aware of. And like Rupert and Guy said, I would actually pipe out the stream and then put scopes on that final stream and see where you're at. A different solution would be, because it seems to me that it's only the lower third of the gamma that it's actually getting pushed at times. And a solution for that could be, if you want to make a quick LUT for it, in Resolve, instead of using the lift gamma gain, move to log wheels, and that'll just push up just the lower end, just a little bit, and it'll leave your middle gray and your highs in the same place, but just lift up that bottom end. That would be something that, if you are trying to retain all the detail, if you have a lot of dark detail, excuse me, in the lower third, I would use that to get a little bit back, but then not shift anything else between your mids and your highs.
Yeah, and a lot of these shifts, and we see this actually with most things that convert something from a baseband, or the input from the switcher or from any video input to H.264. There's a bunch of decisions that are made there, and they're almost never one-on-one. So if you're taking that, as soon as it's anything that's converting to H.264, whether it's a web presenter or an ATEM Mini or a Magewell or whatever, is going to have some shift. We've rarely seen it be point to point all the way through. And to everyone's point here, is the way to figure that out is to figure out how you're going to compensate, either with curves or LUTs or so on and so forth, to move that back to where it needs to be. And I do that. You'll see me actually do it, because going through, for instance, Twit's system as it passes through, they have some other gamma shift, and so what you'll see me do is I'll get them to put me up on screen before the show, and then I go into my this is why I get so, like, you just need blackmagic cameras, is because I go in my switcher, I go in and I sit there and I just move my camera and I move my everything so that both of them look, so that I look the way I want to look in their output back to me, or in Twit, as opposed to allowing it to go. So you always, a lot of times we have to look at, when we're correcting for HDR and other things, we just have to look at it on the far end. In many streams, I want to look at it on my phone. The Apple phone, I believe, is one of the most accurate monitors for a stream that I can get. So I look at it and I go, does that look correct? And if it, and it doesn't matter what it looked like before it went into the encoder. What matters is what it looks like on the phone, or in Zoom, because that's where the output is. Next question.
From the Great White North, we have Matt Cool from Montreal. It says, I'm about to do a hybrid event with 250 people. What would be the best way to get a good eyeline with the cameras at the back of the room?
Go ahead, Rupert.
Just a shame that they're at the back of the room, but it kind of depends on a few things, what that distance truly is, whether those 250 people are the remote audience or the in-person audience, and whether your hybrid in this case involves the presenters being able to see the remote audience. If it does, then you want to get those people up on a big screen as close as possible to the camera. Now, if the distances were shorter, you could look at teleprompter kind of setups. But if they're further away, then just big screens near the camera. If you're not going to have those screens, or you're not going to look at your audience, then tally lights may be your next way of attracting your presenters' attention towards the camera. But really, that is the final part. The presenter needs to be well trained and prepped to look at those cameras and make the remote audience feel as though they are being paid attention to.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, Rupert touched on it. Depending upon the distance from the stage, 55 to a 75-inch monitor placed, in front of the sticks of the camera, so the camera's peeking right over the top of it on the camera platform, and have the cameras raised up on a platform at the back of the audience so they can easily be seen and not be obscured by anyone walking or being seated. And if you're using a teleprompter, of course, put the teleprompter text on that big screen. And then when the teleprompter text is not on the screen, if it's just a Quest Q&A or something like that, then put a gallery up, or the personal or the individual images of the people that are interacting with the hybrid event on that big screen so that they can look back at the camera, similar to how a teleprompter would work if you had the cameras closer.
Great answers. Next question.
All right, coming in from Hasmuk Gajar in Cape Town, South Africa. In after hours, heard some chatter on the side tone. What is advised by the panel when attending office hours? Set up side tone or not?
I'm a strong believer in side tone. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, +1 on that. Without side tone, I kind of lose my mind. Too many years in broadcast.
The thing is that when you get started, you will be worse when you do it, because the first thing that happens is you start to be self-conscious of your voice, and you'll start talking like this. This is the most popular thing for people to do, and when they're listening to themselves, because they think about radio and they think about listening to their voice, and then they talk like this all the time, and that's super annoying. so anyway, over time, over hundreds of hours of doing it. And this is the great thing about office hours. You get to do that for hundreds of hours, not very long distance, that you get comfortable with it. And then you get to start deciding how you want your voice to sound. And you also just hear when you're making noise and other things. The biggest problem you have when you don't have side tone is that you don't hear you making other noises. Even sometimes you don't hear it with side tone, but you definitely are much less conscious to it when you don't hear the stuff that's going into your mic. Because when you're listening to side tone, you're hearing what the mic is hearing. So if there's a lawnmower outside, if there's someone making noise, if you're hearing it in your ears, then you probably have an issue. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I was going to make that point. And, these days with the good in-ear monitors, we don't have to do the Gary Owens thing with live from beautiful downtown Burbank. That was the old school version of side tone.
Right.
But it is important. It also, if you're going to mix in anything, it lets you hear what's going out.
Yeah. Next question.
All right, moving along to another one from Hasmuk. On Sunday, there was discussions on teleprompters. Okay, so I need to order one 24-inch was recommended. There are myriads of prompter people models in their 24-inch range. Can the panel decide which model I need? Hoping to set up B4 next cook-along.
Go ahead, Mitch.
Well, it depends, Hasmuk, on how you're going to end up using it. Primarily, if you're going to use it for Zoom calls and it's in a fixed position, the Prompter Pro Flex model 24-inch has a articulating arm attached to it, which means that you don't need as much depth behind your desk to make it work. They also have I guess it's a hi-hat mounted where you can mount it to a tabletop. Some of us don't have the real estate behind our table or camera to place a tripod. So that would affect it depending on your application. If we knew more about that, that would be helpful. But the smaller it is, the closer it has to be to you. So if you're going with a 12-inch, no, you're not going to be able to see that very far away. 24-inch is about as good as it gets.
Go ahead, Jason.
So I actually was talking to prompter people about a second hour, and we really should do that because their product line, in all fairness to them, is very hard to understand. It all kind of seems like remotely, bizarrely the same, and also varies quite a bit in quality and build and use case. I'm going to second that one. The articulating arm is fantastic. And in the new studio, I'm going to put it on rails, but for right now, it's on a very good boom arm.
Courtney?
I haven't looked at these specific models from prompter people, but another important thing is to find them one that can mount on a 5-inch spud stand, like a rolling light stand, so that you can just roll it up and it has the beam splitter and the monitor all attached to a spud connector that goes. I thought I had one here. Yeah. Something like this that goes on the bottom of it and has a 5/8 hole, so you can pop it on the top of a C-stand. That way you don't have to deal with finding a tripod and mounting it to the head of the tripod. If it's going to be a static teleprompter, you can go with that fashion. So look for one that has a freestanding mount on it so it doesn't have to be attached to a tripod necessarily.
Yeah, and a lot of those, a lot of the prompter people ones have a variety of mounts across the bottom, so you can put something on it, but you can use that. The only thing to be careful of is when you start putting heavier cameras and larger 24-inch, you have to be careful of shearing it, because you just don't have as much surface space on it. And I've done it. It's horrible because the glass doesn't last. The glass will not handle the G's that it takes when you shear that little 3/8. When the thing hits, that's the end of that teleprompter. So anyway, not, or at least the end of the glass. So keep that in mind. Go ahead. Let's go to the next question.
Coming in from Jonas Dattel in Stuttgart, Germany. I read about the coding ARM-based embedded systems introduction in today's mail. Is there more information on that or a summary?
There's a summary on office hours. So there's a link in that website, but that's the summary. The officehours.global Tally Light project is the summary that we have, and right now we're trying to figure out if people are interested in it. We're trying to have people sign up and say, "Hey, this is something I'd actually like to be part of. I'm going to be part of that group." So, the idea is to kind of get our hands wet a little bit in working with a very basic setup. But in this case, we're going to kind of build a little tally light and learn how to put numbers on it and learn how to do basic coding for that process. So for anyone who's looking at like, how do I actually get started with using some kind of embedded chip? Now there's a lot of options once we get into it. I was looking for the one that I just bought. There are, there's Arduinos and there are other embedded systems. There's also one that I just got that is Swift based that I'm playing with. So it's a Swift because in the end, I'm probably going to want to just learn Swift, as I kind of, I'm too old to learn lots of languages. So anyway, so that's kind of where I look at everything through a filter of does it do Swift? But given that, I'm still going to learn this one because it's going to help me think about it. It's going to help me think about all the electrical I/O that's required to do this. And so, we're really fortunate to have the support that we're working on here. So that this is the there's an overview there. There's a movie that you can look at there, and you'll be able to check it out. But we're going to be using the BBC microbit to do this first introduction. And over time, I expect us to play around with all the embedded hardware. But this is going to be the place we start. All right, next question.
Another one from Douglas Carmichael. Would a HyperDeck be a useful device?
And I skipped did I skip anyone? No, okay. Anyway, go ahead. Next question.
Sorry. Douglas Carmichael asks, would a HyperDeck be a useful device for live replays along with an ATEM Mini?
Go ahead, Stuart.
Yes and no. The HyperDeck's not aimed at doing slow motion and the like. So if you're doing replays of sports, and there's no interface for it. Now, Blackmagic could easily take the Jog Shuttle controller from Resolve, hook it up to something like one of the Ultra Studios or one of the HyperDecks, and control the replay speed through that way. So they could do it fairly easily, but at the moment you don't have that interface. So yes, you could queue up replays or queue up things you want to play, but not to have the same sort of control granularity as you have with true replay devices.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I would hope that our friends at MixFX may be able to take it a little bit further. I have mine here, and it's a brand new one, and there's no additional functionality that it has that the earlier versions have, other than it's a little bigger and it doesn't overheat. But the idea, I think, is just as Stuart was saying, is the ability to queue things up quickly and get them out there. It's going to take some kind of an external Stream Deck setting to make all that happen.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, if you're talking about live replays for instant replay on a live show, it really won't do the job because it can't record and playback at the same time. So once you go into playback mode to look for whatever just happened, you've stopped recording. So that's why EVS systems and replay systems are so expensive, because they are continuously recording into a buffer and continue to record while you're playing back. So they allow playback and record simultaneously. So that's why you got to step up to do that. If you're just using it to play out pre-recorded pieces in a show or something that you're not recording at the same time, then of course HyperDeck would work fine, or a playout B from Jonas would work fine as well, and a cheaper alternative.
Yeah, there's basically a series of levels of how you can do this. At the one of the more cost-effective ways to do it, Softron makes a Mac-based software and hardware called MReplay. And so MReplay is in kind of the sub $10,000 range to do this, and it lets you bring in a multiple number of cameras and do playback, and it can do a lot of the recording and playback at the same time, and all the things that you would need there. So that's one option. The next step up from there is that NewTek makes a 3Play, and 3Play is, I think, in the $20,000 range, if I remember correctly. Doug might be able to correct me.
20,000.
Yeah, 20,000 for 3Play. The next one up from there is a Dreamcatcher, and that's from Evertz, and they make a Dreamcatcher, and that's last time I looked, it was about 80 grand, and then the EVS ranges from 80 to 250,000, depending on the number of channels, 4K, those types of things on the way in, and then there's and the other thing that you have to remember is that it takes a lot of talent to run any of these. So regardless of what you can do, mark in, mark out, playback, all those things takes some experience. And so one of the issues that you get into is especially with EVS, is that it's easy for us to find EVS operators almost anywhere in the country because every sports truck uses them. And so so if you get out of that, and then smaller stuff uses 3Play, and Dreamcatcher is kind of an in-between. It's usually folks that it does have more features than EVS. The problem is that I think they finally broke down and put an interface in that was as rudimentary as the EVS because the EVS operators couldn't use it. And so those are kind of the things that you kind of look through there. But it's a lot of practice too. So it's not just the because usually you're doing it in a very, very short period of time. Go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, just for anyone who's looking for a basic replay solution, if you've got the top-end vMix license, you can record in that and play out at the same time. However, I would not do that on the same PC that I'm streaming from. And I say that from personal experience. You will cause the machine to fall over.
There you go. Next question.
Coming in from Hosmuk Gajar in Cape Town, South Africa. In a meeting this morning in Teams, my audio chain of a Heil PR40 and a Mixpre into a MacMini M1 did not work as others could not hear me. Used a browser version of Teams on Safari, eventually left the meeting and came back in, and it worked in Teams. No speaker selection.
Go ahead, Rupert.
So Teams should give you access to your different audio devices. That may be easier to get to when you're not yet in a meeting. So that might be something you want to look at ahead of time. There should be a little option there to test audio device again before you go into in the meeting. We have found Teams features to be less than ideal on the Mac. It's a Microsoft product, so it's the richest features I think are going to be on the Microsoft platform. Having said that, they do update things pretty regularly, so just make sure you're on the latest version. If it did work after, I read that as restart, but if it did work after leaving and coming back, I'd look at maybe some other application hanging onto your audio device and locking it up. If it didn't work at all, then I would check in the operating system to make sure that Teams has access to the microphone.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, as Rupert mentioned, the Teams gives you the option to select your input and output device. Just in case, though, that it was the first time you've installed and fired up Teams, if you add Teams, if you give Teams the ability to access your microphone in macOS, you oftentimes have to reboot that app. So it might not have been rebooted, and you weren't. It wasn't seeing its permission to access your specific microphone. And also, yes, Teams has been okay. What's really been a pain in terms of hanging on to audio devices, in my experience, has been Blue Jeans, which is painful.
Yeah, Courtney.
I had a very similar problem yesterday. We were doing a live hybrid stream, and we wanted to use it as an interrotron between a remote Teams member and a person in the studio. And we were feeding the output of a Canon camera into a capture card into a Mac, and had Teams running on the Mac. And the person on the other end said, we see them fine, but their audio was really distorted, and audio was feeding the camera, and that audio was coming down an HDMI cable into the capture card into the Mac. But in Teams, we didn't seem to have any way of adjusting, when we selected that USB capture card, we didn't seem to have any way of adjusting the audio level. They said it was distorted on their end. but we couldn't adjust the audio level in Teams in any way. And I don't know if that's just a function of the Mac interface for Teams or what. In most other, my experience in most other Teams, you have the ability to either set it to auto or control the level, and I didn't see that, so that may have been part of the problem too.
Yeah, at least on the Mac, the Teams interface is pretty rudimentary. so I think that's part of the problem. I would never use any video conferencing from a web page unless I was using Google Meet. Like that's because it's designed to do that. But outside of that, and even then, you see the limitations of that pretty quickly. If I wouldn't use Zoom or Teams or anything else through a web page, unless I had literally no choice. So you want to be very careful of that. With all of them, they're limited to the web page. I've been testing some other stuff that hopefully we'll get to look at sometime soon, and the web page version and the app version are night and day. So you really want to look for things that are native to the platform. Next question.
All right, coming in from Douglas Carmichael. With people traveling less on average, why do you think Apple introduced MacBook Pros first?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Well, first of all, they didn't. The Mac Mini has been around. With the M1 has been around for a long time. Secondly, if you look at the market numbers still say that the MacBook and Air and MacBook Pro are still going to outsell the Mac Mini, and because even though we're not traveling as much, well, not all of us are traveling as much. Some of us are still traveling, but more to the point, a lot of people travel within their own home because they're not at a fixed location. They're not at a desk. Sometimes they're on their bed. Sometimes they're at their couch. Sometimes they're at the coffee table. And a Mac Mini is just a little bit tougher to be bringing in keyboard, mouse, and monitor everywhere you need to go. People like that portability, and that's why the Mac, any type of laptop, is going to supersede any type of Mini. That's going to be perfect for us, but for everybody else, they'll want the laptop.
I will have to say, I have to say that I've gotten kind of settled into my work computers are in my office, and the rest of my house, the most I take is an iPad, out to the outer part of the house, and it's a much more civilized way to live. Like that's all I have to say. Like I go into a mode when I'm in here, and I go into a different mode as soon as I walk out of the room, and I think that it has been very key to my my own like psychological health is to have to step away from the gear and not have my laptop floating around. Go ahead, Stuart.
Firstly, I think Douglas's question there is not about just the M1 products, but only the M1 Pro and M1 Max products, and them only introducing the MacBook Pro with those so far. I think there is two reasons. Firstly, they want those MacBook Pros to be seen as a potential portable Mac Pro equivalent. And a Mac 1 Mini with the Max chip in it is going to cut sales away from the top-of-the-range Mac Pro. And yes, I see the kitty too.
He wandered into my thing. Sorry for the distraction. I got to do a Doug real quickly. This is our cat. He usually doesn't make it into my office. But he got out. Anyway, didn't expect that. Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, okay, let me get the kitty out of my mind. And now there's a dog. Yeah, so from my understanding, one of the products that had the biggest sort of pains and issues were the Mac Pros due to the promises made by Intel to get to a certain size and a thermal space that they promised Apple for many years. And I think Apple was just at the limit of what they could take, which is why I think in 2019 they put out the i9s, yeah. And still the first thing that people found is that, they get hot very quickly and the fans spin up and they throttle down, right? So from the products that they are selling most, that had the most complaints from that side of things. And they needed to address that. And also they are going to address 90% of the problems for 90% of the people as quickly as possible. And the power that they have now, a lot of people, are going to be able to, maybe I don't have to go for the full tower. This might be able to get me far enough. Now, a bunch of us are still going to get a tower, but for most of the stuff that we do, 90% of the time, it might just be enough to get us through.
Yeah, and the MacBook Pro is, I mean, the best-selling Mac that they make. So I think that that's also the thing to start off with, and I think that part of it is that you have to, from a PR perspective, you put one thing out at a time. It lets you solve that problem, get it all out there, ship it out, and Apple tends to like to keep people focused. So I would be surprised if we don't see the Mac Mini come out before March. I think sometime between now and then we'll see an update. I don't even know if they need to do a press release. I mean, I don't even know if they don't have to do an event. I think they could just say, hey, this is available, so next question.
All right, this one comes in from Noah Sargent in Fullerton, California. I have a Solidcom M1 full duplex comm system from Hollyland. It has 4-wire and 2-wire intercom system interfaces. Could I use an adapter to convert one or both of these connected to an XLR for program in?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, certainly. I would probably, if I had to choose one, I'd go with the 4-wire because that's a full duplex connection, and with 2-wire, you have to null your connection every time you change the cable length. So I would go with the 4-wire. Going from the Ethernet jack on that, it would be a pin 4 will be audio positive, and pin 5 would be negative. 7 and 8 are ground. And you can create a single XLR female to get audio into that, or you can also make a Y cable to get audio in and out of the device.
And I don't remember what the model numbers are, but both Clearcom and Studio Technologies makes boxes that are 4-wire to 2-wire, converters that you can also get, that you just plug them in and make them go. Next question.
Coming in from Stuart Fairweather in Melbourne, Australia. The silicon shortage is affecting many industries around the world. How is Apple getting around this to get their silicon etched?
Go ahead, Charles.
My understanding is that they just purchase all the bandwidth that TSMC can actually output because they have the money to do so years in advance. And at that point, they stay ahead of the industry.
I think one thing that's hard to keep in mind is that, what we're seeing today was designed years ago. We're looking at, 2, 3, 4 years after when it was actually designed. So the allocation of the resources to get those was a long time ago, probably before COVID, for the chips that we're getting right now. So that's part of the issue there. Next question.
Okay. Sorry for the scratching noises. It's not zombies coming through the wall. They're working on the stucco on the outside of my house. This one comes in from John M. Gerard in Berkeley. Alex, I got a 14-inch MacBook Pro with Apple M1 Max with 10-core CPU, 32-core GPU, 16-core neural engine, 1 terabyte SSD, and 32 gigabytes unified memory. Which one did you buy?
We'll go real quickly. John?
I don't know if this is a typo or not, but I don't believe the Max is available on the 14.
I thought it was, but maybe it isn't. I think it is. I think you can get both of them there. Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, I got the 16 just maxed out, but which is 2 terabyte SSD. And I think I wish I got the 4.
And then Jason?
Same as Charles.
And I'm still holding out for Mac Mini. I don't really need another laptop. So I want the chip very badly. I don't want the laptop. So I'm going to hold out. I probably will buy one if I don't see a Mac Mini, but I'm going to see if a Mac Mini drops in the next couple months. Next question.
This one comes in from Manchester, Connecticut. Don Modine asked, will the touch bar be missed, or what took so long getting rid of it?
Go ahead, Mickey.
I'm so happy that the touch bar is gone because I have so many shortcuts in Pro Tools that require the function keys.
Jeffrey?
Only thing I'll miss is that little arrow that says touch bar is here. Touch bar is here.
Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, the only thing that I'm going to miss about it is it telling me, I'll put your fingerprint here so I could purchase something.
Yeah, I do miss that part. That's the only part I miss, but I could just put that somewhere. The big thing was I was constantly hitting it by accident. Like it was just this constant pulling something random up because I hit it. So I am so glad that it's gone. Next question.
Coming in from Robert Shoji in Los Angeles. sorry for the scratching, right next to me, and I have original sound turned off, is Drive Savers, located in Novato, the name of the data recovery service that Alex has recommended in the past.
Yes, I'm going to run through this one real quickly. Yes, it is. It's 5 minutes from my house. They're great. They're very expensive, but when you lose data that you absolutely positively have to have, they're the best chance. You going into their front room is you see drives that have been like charred, underwater, crushed, and they get the data that can be gotten out of them. So it's a pretty amazing location. Yeah. Jason, you approve as well.
I have nothing to add. They're the best.
Yeah. Next question.
This one, come on, mouse. Okay. There we go. No. There it goes. Okay, Noah Sargent from Fullerton, California. Could Blackmagic put out a next generation video switcher that includes SDI inputs and a 100 gigabit network switch for their version of NDI for their studio cameras?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yes, they could.
They could. We're seeing some uncomfortable process of them starting to move from one place to the other. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens next. As they move towards it. We knew that they were going to move to something, and it's just a matter of what it is. Go ahead, Stuart.
Sure, they could, but no, they won't, because they want you to step up to the next range above that for the professional connections. They don't want you using HDMI for professional stuff.
Well, I don't think it's HDMI. I think it's the Ethernet connections that they're using for. They have the Ethernet for the cameras, and so it's just a matter of figuring out where that's going to go. Next question.
And this one comes in from Douglas Carmichael. What techniques or software have been helpful when making music to break a creative logjam when you are feeling stuck?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I would say like try to take inspiration from other people's work. Have a listen to music that you enjoy. But also on top of that, I would take inspiration from the environment around you. Have a listen to what's going on in where you are. Douglas, I know almost every day you take a walk in the park. What do you hear when you're there? Try to take ideas from that.
Charles, we're going to move pretty quick.
So the approach that I have taken when I'm stuck in one thing, I will try and practice something else that I'm interested in, but I'm really bad at. And it starts to retrain my brain to look at something from a broad spectrum. I have to stand back and learn something new. And unconsciously, my brain will start to resolve the issues at the other end. And usually when I come back, I have a solution that works.
I go with Courtney.
Yeah, I find paying attention to something else like a piece of software or a program or music just distracts me more. I go for a walk where, I walk around a place where I don't have to really pay too much attention. I don't have to deal with traffic. And that lets me concentrate on whatever problem I was stuck on, or try and go to sleep, because usually I find myself laying awake at night, coming up with new ideas or solutions to problems I've had during the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question. We're going to go just a little over. We're almost done.
Okay, coming in from Eric Butkus in Chicago. A while ago, you had Felipe Narde on the show to talk about Zoom Maestro. He had a 25-person Zoom test environment set up, but now all the links appear to be broken. Does anyone know if that site still exists or if there's something similar?
I think he took it down, and I'm going to let you guys do the last question while I take the cat somewhere else because it's tearing apart my office. So anyway, this little guy is he's just, I saw the lights go on and off a second ago. So I'm like, he's taking apart my power and which may be fatal for him. So anyway, go ahead and go for the last question. I'll be right back.
All right. Douglas Carmichael asked, what would you keep the screen of the MacBook Pro clean, or how would you keep the screen of the MacBook Pro clean without streaking?
Yep, I'll take that one. Very simple. You need a completely absorbent cloth, and Apple actually makes them. And in fact, they added, if you look at the new accessories, they've added a $20, I'm not kidding, a $20 little wipey thing. Okay, all you have to do is be able to get the skin, oil, and I hate to say it, but spit off of the screen. That's all that there is to it. I find that eyeglass cleaner works the very best. So you take the laptop, open the clamshell, put the clamshell down against the desk so you're not pushing against anything and nothing's going to drip down, and then just wipe it like a window, and it will be just fine and pristine.
Okay, Stuart. Stuart, did you have a...
I did have my hand up and I pushed the answers up so that we could follow the normal system, but Jason literally covered. I was going to say the same stuff for cleaning glasses is absolutely perfect.
And I was going to suggest there's a spray that we can get here in the United States called Sprayway. It's a it's a cleaner that's mainly alcohol based and foam, and it's a detergent based, and it's very lightweight. Does not have ammonia in it. You don't want to ever use ammonia. And you spray it on a cloth, never spray it on the screen itself. Spray a light spray on a cloth and wipe that off and let it evaporate. It evaporates very quickly, and it should evaporate without streaks.
Excellent. Now we're going to go ahead and change subjects and talk a little bit about surround. So, so one of the things that, of course, Apple is kind of pushing towards, and one of the things that we got to see a little bit of an announcement yesterday was that Apple is now supporting spatial audio inside of Logic, and I'll show a little bit of what that looks like in a second inside of that. But it's a really, I think it's worth us having the conversation. One of the things that I try to do as we're working through this, whether it's the beginning of, talking about virtual events or USDZ or other things, is to have us have conversations about things that provide opportunities for us to get ahead. Most of what I've done in different industries is try to jump on something a bit earlier than everyone else. So you get time to figure it out. You can get hired to do stuff that you don't necessarily. This is the one place where you get to go, I don't know how to do it, but I'm willing to figure it out because nobody else knows how to do it either. So that is a big advantage in this process is to get into something early where you can actually get work and you can do it and you've got time. You're not trying to catch up with everyone. No one else is there. Once it becomes super popular and everybody's doing it, we used to have the saying inside of I'm sure that we didn't make it up, but in ILM, it was commonly said, if you ever complained, it was commonly said, well, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. So when it gets easy, everyone will be doing this kind of thing. So there's two pieces of it. One is the technology, and that's getting solved over time. The other is the understanding, and that's going to be the big thing, is figuring out, just because you can do surround, doesn't, should you, and how should it work? Now, I will bluntly say that I don't like listening to stereo anymore. So I get, I can hear it. Even something that with Apple's virtualization, it sounds better. But raw stereo now, for me, as someone who works in this all the time, I find it to be muddy. Because one of the things about it is that your brain just doesn't have anywhere to put all those instruments and all those sounds and everything else, because it's just coming through you got two inputs and you're just packing everything onto it. Whereas when you start to do that, when you start to put it into different places in your mind, your brain can actually hear it better. It's still coming through two ears oftentimes with headphones, but your brain is able to process it in the way, when it's being kind of extended. I don't know, Mickey, if you want to add more to how you approach it or how you think about that.
Like the difference between actually having audio come in through multiple speakers as opposed to binaural processing. Yeah, definitely. Like in terms of, I've only recently started to experiment with, monitoring surround mixes and binaural. So during times when I can't be in the studio, it certainly gives you a slight sense of placement and space, but it's still different from actually having multiple sources of sound spaced out, time aligned, EQ'd properly to the room. So I still appreciate having a proper surround system a lot more than what Apple is doing with their two earbuds or AirPods
Right.
Max. But It's interesting how they're implementing it. It's
And
different from anyone else.
yeah, and what we want to do is also start to think about there are a lot of different things that um, that we call surround. So there's ambisonic, there's binaural, and then there's of course the more of the traditional. And there's lots of formats. People have made up lots of formats, but these are the basic ones. And then you have some version of surround. So there's now when you hear 5.1, you'll hear 5.1, 7.1, 7.12, 7.14, 5.14, 5.12. Those are all different formats that you start to hear. Just to kind of make sure that it's clear of what those mean, is that the the 5 or 7, those are the speakers around the plane of your head, typically. So those are and so it's like, left, right, center. Like for 5.1, I think it's left, right, center, left surround, right surround are those. That's the 5. The 1 is the LFE, so low frequency, and LFE, Mickey, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it caps off at 80. Is that right? It's 80 hertz.
It depends on the playback system. For
Mhm.
home theaters, they typically do the crossover at higher frequency,
Mhm.
usually 120, somewhere there,
Mhm.
because the home theater speakers, their actual individual satellites can't handle that much low end, so
Right.
they would feed that into the subwoofer as opposed to having those take care of it. But in a proper theatrical system, those systems, especially in Atmos, they're designed to be full range speakers.
And if you have questions about this, make sure to throw those in while we're talking through this. We're just kind of doing a quick introduction. One of the things that you want to think about then the last number that you see. So if you see a 514 or a 714, the 4 are up speakers. So that you'll have, if you have 4 up speakers, you have 4 speakers above you, and then then you can push stuff into it. Now, um, the other piece of this is really that we talk about a lot is beds versus objects. So inside of Atmos, you have you use both of them. And Mickey, how many channels are there? Is it 128? Is that correct, or is it more?
With an Atmos setup, coming from your DAW into the render, or if your render is built into your DAW, yes, it's 128 channels, and that would be a mixture of multiple beds. Atmos requires you to have at least one bed, and then the rest can be a mixture of beds or objects.
And can you explain the difference between beds and objects?
So beds are how you create beds, how you traditionally create channel-based mixes. So it can start off as a 5.0 bed or 5.1 bed, all the way up to, I believe, a 712 bed. And those typically you'd reserve those for things that you don't need to move around specifically in a room. Most of the time in most films, you would have your dialogue almost always be dead center unless you have a reason to pan them around. So you typically keep those in a bed. Same with your backgrounds, your static background sounds. You're not flying those around all the time, so you'd keep those in a bed. But for things like hard effects and Foley, some Foley, but definitely hard effects and design elements, you might want to place those on objects so that you have the granularity to place them specifically in a room as opposed to be assigned specifically to a channel.
And one of the places that we see that also is in games and so on and so forth, where you actually want to have things connected to where they actually are, and that's cutting edge right now. Like that's not something that we see very much of right now. I'll show you let's see if I can cut to this here. This is Logic, and this is the new version of Logic. And so you'll see that in surround we have a couple options here, and I have literally just got to start playing with it. So you can have an object here, or if I hit surround here, I can do that's why I have it set up now. And with all of these, they have a slightly different. So here's one version of this. So this is the strings, and you can see, I can design this via planar. And right now, you can see that the strings are kind of set up here, and they're very wide. So the strings are set up. Your right and left are kind of very wide, and you'll start to pull these in here. But I can also have a spherical view of that as well. so I can start to play with how that. And this is kind of giving you a sense of what those, a rough sense of in the position of where they look. And I have to say that this is, it's a pretty interface. So as far as how to do it, I haven't had time to play with it very much, although it is pretty addicting to start playing with it. This is a sample track that came, Little Nas X sample track, and I hope that Apple does more of these. I think that one of the things that's really cool is to have something that's already done, that you can actually start to play with, that you can noodle about with. So here's that look here, for those strings, and then again, per channel we can have a different view, and here you have this is the object view here, and so you can see this, and of course this can be keyframed around the person, as needed, and so this is obviously the position around the head, and then of course I can adjust the actual, this is the position vertically over the head as far as how it works there. So no, I would never, we shouldn't animate it this way, because this is the main vocal, but you get a sense of this is what it looks like as we start to kind of work through that process. And so and we're definitely so it's this is like literally I've had access to it for just a couple minutes. so anyway, so it's so we're still kind of playing with what that looks like, but with every channel you can start to make decisions about where that lives in the space, and so that's something to kind of start to think about there. And again, I think that one of the things that we want to do is we'll make some stuff that we've done too. I got to get final permission from the remotes, but we'll hopefully put some of that stuff up there for people to play with as well, so we can all work on it together as a lab. So we'll see if they approve that, then we'll make that available. But we'll definitely work on that. Let's go ahead and jump into some of the questions. Go ahead.
Righty. Juancy Robles in Mexico says, can we have some labs with Logic Pro to learn the basics and the new spatial audio functionality? We just had a little bit.
There's your little mini lab there, but we didn't get to play anything out. So we're absolutely going to have labs. So we're going to, right now it's part of why I wanted to do the second hour, was to introduce everybody to it, show that it's now available in Logic. It's probably easier in Logic as far as the setup goes than anything I've seen in the past. I want to figure a couple things out over the next couple weeks, and then we'll start doing labs. Next week is all about Office Hours 2.0, but probably after next week, I think that we will look at doing some labs. So this is an opportunity. It is. So the cool thing about Logic is you can download a 90-day version. I wouldn't download it yet. Wait until we do the first lab. So, if you're excited about it, go ahead and download it. But there's a 90-day version. And what I want to do is kind of get my ducks in a row over the next week and a half or 2 weeks, and then we'll start doing labs. What I want to do is time it so that everyone here, we have 90 days of labs. So, I mean, once a week, we'll play with it. We'll play with some stuff, talk about it, and try to really get our head around what we can do in Logic as far as how that goes. And if you want to use something else, you're more than welcome to. But it's just that Logic is a relatively inexpensive and full-featured solution to do what we're trying to do. So, yeah, absolutely. Next question.
This one comes in from Danny Law in Malaysia. Is listening to spatial audio possible through bone conduction, like the Aftershocks headphones?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, I'm not an expert on this, but I would imagine not really, because spatial audio depends upon psychoacoustics and modeling based on, for a binaural sound, if you're listening through headphones. So it alters the frequency response of each channel to give you its position in space, so your brain interprets it as a place in space rather than just coming from the left ear or the right ear. And I imagine the frequency curve and the frequency, is completely different on bone conduction than it is through your eardrum. So I would think that the model that's designed for listening through the eardrum won't work correctly psychoacoustically through bone conducting headphones. But I may be wrong. Mickey may have them better.
Let's go ahead to the next question.
All right. Coming in from Rick Combs in Columbia, Tennessee. I have a media room that is a 5.1 surround sound. Is there any way to connect my desktop computer so I can utilize the sound system?
We haven't tested it. We have a theory that the HDMI out of your computer will carry the 5.1 out of it. So you should be able to plug the 5.1 directly in, and when you play this out, it should get there. And I haven't had time to put it into one of my systems to see if that actually works or not. So, so I'm going to be working on that in the next. That's one of the things over the next week and a half, is to make sure that the monitoring works, and that we can hear it. And I have some test files that are very specific to this need. So I'm going to run those test files through it and see if I'm getting the output that I expect. But we think that that's going to work. Go ahead, Courtney.
I haven't tried it yet, but a lot of computers have Toslink and have a digital audio output, some of them through a headphone jack, which could have a little laser in there for connecting Toslink to your stereo, and many stereos have Toslink inputs, and that might carry 5.1 as well if your firmware and your software of whatever computer you're using can output it.
Right. Yeah. So we're gonna do some research on that and figure out what the what is necessary or what's possible as far as getting that out. It does, like when you're listening to it, you can listen to it in your headphones. It's of course the binaural kind of fold down that it does is not accurate. So so if you want to do something that you actually want to send to other people, you're probably going to want to. There's two thoughts about that. Is that you should listen to it in headphones, because a lot of people are going to listen to it in headphones. So it's worth listening to there. But I'm not clear whether what you hear in Logic and what you hear in Apple Music will be the same. So I think that you just want to, we definitely want to figure out how that works. And so we're going to work on that pipeline over the next week and a half. Next question.
Less of a question and more of a statement from Michael Drosty in Peoria, Illinois. It says, I'm happy to do a Logic spatial audio demo. I don't know if he's.
Do you have something to show right now, or
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you give me a screen host?
Yeah, if we can, let's see here. I think
Co-host?
Mickey, oh, I got it back because Mickey, I think, had a power issue here. So let's go ahead. There you go. You should have it, Michael. Do you see it?
I'm working on it,
Mhm.
and I want to share just Logic.
Mhm.
Okay, you should be seeing it, I believe.
I see it.
All right. This is, let's see if you can hear it. Can you hear it?
We don't. If you go back and share it again and make sure to turn on sound, we should be able to hear it at that point.
Okay.
So when you just share it again, and then in the lower left, you should see a little button that says
Yep,
share sound.
got it.
And we
Sorry.
probably won't hear it in surround, but you can definitely play it anyway.
Okay.
Nope, we still don't hear it. I don't know why. It's probably,
sorry.
you might have to use something like loopback to do this. So don't worry about it right now. Go ahead and just explain the interface. I think. Yeah, we'll work on these demos. These are all new to us. So you could show that or not.
Yeah, I will. But just to get people started,
Mhm.
you have to go under here to mix,
Mhm.
and you can just take a track that you've already produced
Mhm.
and go under mix, and you choose Dolby Atmos. So that's how you can transfer your existing stereo track into Dolby Atmos.
Right.
Then when you select that, you want to choose 7.2, 7.1.2, and Dolby Atmos. And
Now it
then
says it goes
say-
up to 7.1.4, but I don't see that as an option.
Correct.
Interesting. Okay.
I know. And then choose OK.
And do you want to do
Dolby
sample
right
rated?
here?
Right.
It was normally off, and you want to
Right.
choose that
Mhm.
and say OK. And then it translates into the project. Now, what's really cool is the combination of beds.
And the one that's a square here, that's an object, right? Or is that a bed?
That's an object.
That's an object panner. And then the
Right.
one that are circular are the beds, correct?
Correct. Now, I've only been playing for an hour, but I wish
Right.
you could hear it. It's just fantastic to be able to move this around in the stereo field and hear everything. I'm really sorry that you can't hear it.
Right.
The size.
Well,
is
and by the
amazing.
way, I mean, one of the reasons that we are getting close with Office Hours 2.0 is we are working on being able to have the show work in surround. And that means that we'll be able to do events where and this is critical to what we're doing from sound effects and everything else.
Well,
So-
under here on the Atmos plugin, where it was your master channel, you click on this, and this is where you would choose if you have your 5.1 system, your 7.1, 7.4, or whatever. But because I'm in headphones and I don't have a system, I'm listening to it to binaural. But it's just tremendous. It's just tremendous being able to hear the
and have
drums.
have you played with this at all in other on other platforms?
No.
Right.
I have not. I've been on Logic since 2.0 in the 1990s.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
It's great. I'm glad to know that, because I think it'll be great when we start doing these labs. We'll make sure to schedule the time with you to make sure that you're around, because it'll be good to have some folks that really know Logic as well.
The size is amazing, but it really brings out the beat, and depending on what you want to do, it makes it quite a bit more present and louder. But then clicking on like this Cuban piano here and being able to not quite put it on the speaker, but give it a little depth and a little life, I found was very nice. And then I had another bass and I wanted to give it a little life. Now I'm using the surround sound panner instead of the object panner, but it still sounds really nice, giving the bass just a little bit of life here, a little bit of life right there. But I'm not going crazy with the bass, panning it left or panning it right. You want the bass and drums down the center. Want those pretty standard. But then taking this keyboard over here, and it's a contrary keyboard. The Cuban piano is holding out chords, and the other piano is holding out, playing little pops. Right. This is a Luther Vandross song. And so just panned it the other direction, and again, gave it a little life, coming out here and giving it a little life. And it just sounds amazing. I can't say enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, this is something that I think that we would love to, we want to get people thinking about it soon. And right now we have lots of time. Like there's a lot of the industry. If you're already mixing surround, you're probably and you're not busy, you should find out, call your agent, because there's a lot of people that are really busy right now, because a huge part of the music industry right now is converting everything. They're furiously converting these albums to surround. So anybody who has the individual, that has the records, the tracks to work with, are going back and remastering everything in surround right now, because Apple has created so much pressure, for it. That said, I think, some of this can be simulated by what Apple's doing already, but it's never going to be the same. And one of the things that, there's a couple sample tracks, not necessarily for use at work. I was kind of surprised by the track choices, but there's some sample tracks in there that you can. There's a sample track in there that you can download. I think that we're going to post some stuff to get examples. But the other thing to do is search for a song or an instrumental or something that and just search for MIDI. Like just search for Appalachian Spring MIDI, so MIDI. And what you're going to end up with is you can get all those tracks in MIDI and load those into Logic, and then you can start to play with them. Like it's not going to sound as good as the real thing, but if you want to start thinking about something that and something that you can put in there, you can give them instruments, and then what does that sound like if it's floating around? And so we're hoping to kind of work through that, as we move forward. But I think it's a really, really exciting new thing that is going to be a big deal, and it's something that I've been excited about for a long time. I've had a surround system for a long time, for years, but I am more excited about it now because I think it actually has an output. With Apple supporting it, there's a lot of people that will have access to it and be interested in it. And I think, I don't know if it's happening for everyone, but if you have a phone that does HDR and you start taking pictures and you get used to HDR images, you start looking at everything looking a little flat. Everything, like all the regular stuff, looks like, why is that so like underexposed, or why is that doesn't have the detail that I expect? Because you're just getting used to it. And I think that people are going to get used to spatial audio, and then they're going to, really demand it, or not demand it, but it'll just be like, oh, they make a quality decision about your content if you don't know how to do it. So I think that it's definitely worth working on. Next question.
Right, this one comes in from Douglas Carmichael. Says, can you use Logic for post-production spatial sound or audio mixing, not just music?
I don't see any reason why you couldn't. I haven't done it in that realm, but I think that you probably could. And unfortunately, we lost Mickey. Mickey would probably have a better, more accurate thing.
Does it support sync to video?
I believe it does, actually. And I just, but I'm not familiar with it enough. I haven't tried to do that yet, because most of our surrounds to production, we've leaned on Mickey pretty hard to do that. And Pro Tools is really built for that. But I believe that it has some sync to video stuff that's within it that'll play the video and so on and so forth. So I think it's there. I just haven't had to use it. But that's the kind of thing we'll play with in the lab. Next question.
Another one from Douglas Carmichael. L'acoustics offers LISA Studio, he has a link there, to build immersive audio content from the desktop that can transition into an LISA live sound system. Do you see immersive audio taking hold in the live market?
I think it'll take less hold in the live market of live audio, because it's actually pretty hard to do in a live environment. So, there's so many things going on in the acoustics and interplay between the mics and the bits and pieces, and that we haven't found to be super successful. It can be, but it's hard to place things. So the other thing is that if you really start putting things in the place that they need to be for a given song, you really need a band that's ready to play against a click track. So basically, the click track keeps them. They're going to do this on this bar, and they're going to do this, and they have to kind of follow along. Now, a lot of larger bands are used to that. I mean, when you see, a big stage, the part of their in-ear, a big part of their in-ear is them knowing where they are in the song so that they understand what to do next, because they have to get it right every single time. So when they play those songs. And so I think that those are some challenges, though, in the live environment of making it work when you design it. Now, you can design some things that aren't, but I haven't seen anyone be super successful in that area. Go ahead, Courtney.
And I would think that if they're using amplified instruments on the stage, that would totally mess up the directionality of.
It makes it harder to separate things. So what happens is that those speakers and everything else. The best example that I saw that really created the space. There was a band that we worked with that was mostly electronic, and there was almost no noise on the stage when they were like, it was like clink, 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 and in their ears they heard everything, but on our stuff it was a very odd thing in the room, but it sounded really good in the stream. And so I think that's that. And now if you look at what might work better, one of the things that Dolby just announced in Las Vegas is a live theater that's going to play out live events that are sent to the theater. So that's kind of their next big thing as well. So they're going to be showing that, I think. That just went out, I think, a couple days ago. So there's definitely a lot of push for that. I think that might make more sense. Next question.
From Juan C. Robles in Mexico. Could it be possible to use a 5.1 USB sound card and regular speakers to use as a surround system?
I think so, but I am not sure. We have to play with that a little bit more to find out, but we'll do some research in that and see what we can figure out there. But it should work. It works in my head, so we'll see. Next question.
There's a lot of echo in there, though, Alex.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. From Jason Panks in Nashville, Tennessee. And Logic, can you mix Dolby using normal headphones like a pair of Sony 7506s?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Hey, yeah, sorry, lost power there again. Yeah, you can, as was shown by Michael, you can enable binaural rendering from the Atmos render, either built into your DAW or the actual Dolby Atmos production suite. But again, it's an approximation of what will actually come out of the proper surround listening space.
Yeah, I think that we're going to need to really play with the publishing of it to Apple Music and make sure that what we hear inside of Logic and what we hear inside of Music and how they interpret those are the same. I'm not 100% sure they will be. So that's the thing that we need to kind of think through that in that process. Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
And yeah, like a few months ago, Alex, we were working on a project, and I was remote and not in the studio at that time. And when I made those final tweaks that were requested, I worked on them in binaural. I did have someone check it in the studio though, and
And
they
did it work?
seemed to translate, and that's what I delivered, and it worked out. So if similar to our discussion a few weeks or months ago about, you know, mixing in different spaces and how it translates, it's, I guess, a sort of training of the ear as well, and knowing how a binaural render from the
Right.
Atmos render translates to a proper Atmos studio.
Right.
And also, I just want to bring up something very important that both Jeff Francis and Greg Hurd have brought up in the chat, is that in terms of your monitoring solution, LFE is different from some subwoofer. Typically, you use a subwoofer to take in the lower frequencies that cannot be reproduced by your satellite speakers, and that's where the crossover happens. Like at 80 hertz or 120 hertz, you take those frequencies below that and feed those to the subwoofer. LFE is a totally separate channel that's used as a creative tool to add more low end to something, and push that out through an LFE channel.
That's great. And did you? There was a question earlier when you were gone that was about syncing to video. Do you know what Logic has as far as facility?
Yeah. Logic's definitely capable of that. So many composers work within Logic, and they have to, of course, work to picture with that. So that's not an issue. It's more of, and it's also a very capable mixing platform as well. For me, it's more of the ecosystem that surrounds Pro Tools, and also to an extent Nuendo, that really makes them powerful, specifically for post-production use.
And what would you say are the key things there that they have that Logic doesn't?
I'd say one of the big things is integration with tools such as EdiLoad, which is a conforming tool. Same with, from the same company as well, they create a program called EdiQ, which allows you to create cue sheets for ADR, for VO, for Foley, all those little tools that make working post-production so much easier.
Right. No, absolutely. Next question.
This one comes in from Bristol, England, and Sam Downey. He says, since I've been beta testing the Atmos plugin in Logic, I can now talk about it and how to use it, and would like to run a lab for everybody. Is anyone interested?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's hold that thought. We'll talk about it. I'll maybe get talking to you and Michael and anyone else and Mickey, or if anyone else wants to play. But we'll try to find a time where all of us can be. I know that we're now spanning the world between Michael and Mickey and Sam. But we'll see if we can find a time where it makes sense for all of us to maybe do a little lab and do it. But it'll probably be about a week and a half from now. That week we'll probably do some kind of lab, and we'll just start there and start to play with it. I want to figure out a couple things around monitoring solutions. Mickey, we were talking about this, and I wasn't certain. Do you know if the HDMI out of a computer will take the 5.1, to like your stereo system? If you plug that into your AVR, do you think that if you were listening to Logic, you'd be able to hear it in the speakers, or would you need something more specific?
If it's Logic, it's just going to be a PCM stream, so you're limited to 8 channels of monitoring from there.
Right, but 5.1 would fit into that, right? I mean, that would.
Yeah.
Right,
5.171.
Right, just not the 5.14, which is 10. So the if you have a question for you, Mickey, actually, if you're in Logic, do you know what the best way, if you wanted to hear 5.14 or 7.14, what would be the best way to do that?
Yeah, for that you'd want the multi-channel audio interface. You'd want for 5.1, you'd want at least 6 channels, but there's not many 6-channel output interfaces there, so you'd be starting at 8 channels. And if you want to grow to 7.14, you'd need more channels out, but it would be an audio interface.
And if you had so you're looking for more of those outputs. Now, would Dante work for that to be able to
Oh
send
yeah,
those channels out?
absolutely. Yeah.
So if you had anything that had a Dante output with that many outputs, you could theoretically push it out of there.
Yeah, DVS will work well. If if you're using Pro Tools and you are routing through the Dolby Atmos render, a separate program,
Mhm.
you can use Dolby Audio Bridge, which is a plugin that comes with Dolby Atmos Production Suite. You can use Audio Bridge to go out of your DAW into the render and then go out of the render via DVS, which is what a lot of people do.
And then but that's not something that's in Logic, right? That's something that you would need as a separate piece to push out. Or would you be able to listen to it directly out of Logic?
That's possible as well. Select DVS as your output device in Logic.
Okay, that's great. Next question.
Coming in from Douglas Carmichael. When I saw the band Cowboy Mouth at a local festival, the front of house mixer frequently used manual rhythmic panning effects on an analog console, along with dub style delays. Could you consider those a crude form of spatial or immersive?
Courtney?
Well, let me just say that you could use panning effects and you could even use delays, but it would sound a bit archaic.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, currently those rhythmic panning plugins operate in stereo, and even if they would scale up to operating in something larger than stereo, they are still channel based. They do not actually send out panning metadata out to a Dolby renderer. So it will work in the more traditional formats, 5171, 91, whoever else does that. But it won't be true Atmos in a sense that it would be assigned as objects.
Next question.
Comes in from Sam Downey in Bristol, England. Once again, did you know that Dolby Labs have a great resource on everything Logic Pro and Atmos? It's here, and he puts a link in there.
And I think that just dropped. So we'll definitely have to take a look at it. So,
and someone should post that in Marcana.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Next question.
From Doug Carmichael. Would virtual room on headphones plugins like Waves NX, and he has a link, be useful for mixing spatial content on headphones?
Mickey?
Yeah, and NX is really more designed to work with binaural and ambisonics, but yes, it will work with mixing in surround. Though at this point, I would trust Dolby's binaural renderer a lot more, and you don't really need the face tracking head tracking in terms of mixing in Atmos. In my opinion, it's more of doing work for AR and VR deliverables.
Next question.
Okay, last one.
Oh, go ahead, Michael. Didn't see it.
I think Logic has 13 built-in plugins, 13 that have been rejiggered to work in Atmos, but not too many have been really transported yet, as this is very new.
Yeah, and again, there's a temptation to wait until it all simmers in, but there's a real opportunity for a lot of us to get ahead of it and to think about it. And the goal that I have is that we're going to do some take a little time to look at it for those of us who have access to it, play with it a little bit, get our head around it, figure out what the lab should look like, start doing labs over the next couple months. What I want to do is get us to a point where we understand how it works, and then we'll start to bring some speakers in that are working on this stuff and have them talk about that type of thing. We have some people that already know a lot about it, like Mickey and Michael and a couple other folks. So Michael's playing with it. Mickey has a lot of the surround experience, and I think that we're gonna take more advantage of that, and hopefully with the time that they have to work on it. And then, but I've got a couple friends that do a lot of this as well, and so we'll have some roundtable discussions. But the goal is for us to get relatively good at it over the next 3 months, and then we'll see where we're at. Let's go to the next question.
Our last question so far is from Douglas Carmichael. Waves has several variations of the NX plugin that simulate specific rooms like Abbey Road Studio 3, and he has a link. Would switching between simulated rooms be beneficial without a proper mix environment?
What do you think, Mickey?
Yeah, I personally don't see a purpose to these plugins unless you are used to working in these rooms. Then I guess it kind of makes sense. And this isn't also this isn't specific to working in surround or in Atmos. But what I would rather do instead of simulating other people's studios is to learn your own monitoring system and learn how your monitors translate to other systems. I think that would be more beneficial than learning how some other studio you've never stepped in works or sounds like.
I do think that one of the plugins that was updated by Apple is Space Designer. So there's some play where you can kind of play with the sound of what it would look like. I'm very curious in that area of, one of the places that I found to be fairly effective with surround in general is the reverb, of being able to hear the room, like, so you're taking those individual instruments and letting them bounce around and feel like they're around you, like they're in a room. And I find that to actually be more effective than in most stereo versions of that, of where you really feel it creates a space. So I think that that's something that I'm going to play with a little bit more. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I'm ignorant in this field, so I was wondering: do these plugins that generate an environment modeled after a specific room, do they also? And you're talking about a specific recording studio. Does it also incorporate some of the tools that are available in that specific room, or just the acoustics?
No, it's just the monitoring path.
The virtual Neve, yeah, that's what we all want. So I think there is a virtual Neve. There's some Neve plugins, but it's not the same. It's not the same. Next question.
Okay, these late arrivals from Douglas Carmichael. Wohler Technologies offers Atmos-capable in-rack audio monitoring. Here's a link. When would this be useful in a live environment if you can hear the Atmos effects from the rack?
Where that's really useful, because it looks like it's a 12G SDI, it means that you can listen to what's on the feed coming in to make sure that it's actually what you expect it to be. That's super valuable because a lot of us have, that's one of the things when you're in an environment, so much of what you're working on. This is, as someone who works on these streams, the most complex thing is knowing what you're like, being able to measure it. Is this the right speaker? Is that the right speaker? Is it coming out correctly? Are the colors working? It's just a much harder place to play than most other ones. And so it's very valuable. Go ahead, Mickey.
It's essentially a Dolby Digital Plus decoder along with Dolby E and older formats as well. And that's typically in broadcast. You would run through an encoder, and the engineer would actually be monitoring through a decoder, so you know what's going out to the public.
Yeah, it looks really interesting. Now, I'm actually not familiar with this piece of hardware specifically, but definitely a valuable set of tools. Next question.
Coming in from Stan Chan in Roseville, does the Dolby Atmos renderer handle real-time rendering, and what are the options?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, certainly. You can, of course, come in with your 128 channels of a mixture of beds and objects, and you can assign your different monitoring configurations. So you can have your full 714 system, and also set it up to render out to 5.1, 7.1, and even stereo at the same time, and toggle between those different monitoring options. And those all happen in real time.
That's great. Next question. Can't hear you, Courtney.
Sorry. Sometimes the button works, sometimes it doesn't. Douglas Carmichael, busy at the keys again. It says the data sheet for the Wohler monitor I mentioned talks about encoding Atmos content in an SDI or ES3 stream. How do you encode the Atmos data stream live, and what console would you use to mix Atmos live?
Go ahead, Mickey.
To encode them, there are multiple tools. I believe the popular ones are from Telos that can do Dolby Digital and also Dolby Digital Plus. In terms of what consoles, not many have native Atmos support, but I believe what's very popular now are the Calora consoles with a Dolby Atmos add-on.
Right.
But there are other ways to mix Atmos, quote unquote.
Yeah. So one of the things about live in general is that moving the metadata for the objects is very difficult in the current state of, the metadata along the pipeline is the real challenge there. So really you end up working in channels. So you're working in channels, and then those are then re-encoded in a way that comes out as Atmos. It's defined as Atmos so that your receiver on the far end knows that that's what it's supposed to be getting. But otherwise it is it's channel based right now for live. And so then you're just dealing with mixers that can do that. And we can do things in QL1s and so on and so forth. In basic surround, I think that we've discussed being able to do it in an X32, as far as making that work. So that's all things those are possible. As you go down, they get more difficult. And one of the things that's interesting is that as we start to push things forward, what we're hoping is that the hardware manufacturers follow along. So hardware manufacturers make it easier for us to do that live. To get it in right now for most encoding, we need to convert it to EAC3. And we used, as Mickey said, a linear acoustic 5291 is the most popular. It's like a $25,000 box. It does two things that are effective. One is that it makes that conversion, and second, it does the delay of the videos because it takes a long time to process that. So there's a 400 millisecond delay that's related to the 5291 processing that it's able to reapply to the video, which is not trivial to delay video. Delay audio is easy, delay video is hard. So anyway, so the 5291, it makes that conversion. Now there's two encoders, there's one encoder right now that will take the audio directly, and that's the ATEM Titan. And that's about a $45,000 box. And the ATEM Titan though will take basically you're just sending an SDI feed in, and you've got your video, and then it depends on how you set it up, but you might have either 10, 12, or 14 channels. So if you have 10 channels, it's just the 514. If you have 12 channels, it's just the 714, and then you might add 2 stereo tracks to that. And then you're going to pass that into that'll get passed into the encoder. The encoder will then encode as, if you choose to, encode it as Vision as well as Atmos on the way through. So it's going to do all the work for you. You're going to hand it that raw, and typically it can be, the video that goes in can be HLG or PQ, but basically you're trying to send 1,000 nit signal into the encoder for video, and then the audio is a multi-channel audio. And as I said, that can range anywhere from 10. It can actually range from as few as 6 to as many as 14 channels that you're going to pass into the encoder. And of course, the SDI can support up to 16 channels. So at 14, we're near the max of what we can do. And when we start getting to multi-language, then that becomes more complicated. So not that that's been a problem, something we've had to deal with in the past. So anyway, those are some of the challenges as you start to put those things together. Mickey, did you have anything else to add to that? I don't know whether that.
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Yeah. Next question.
All right. Not so much a question, but a note to all from Sam Downey in Bristol, England, says he's put a link to the Dolby Atmos knowledge base in Makana chat that answers plenty of questions.
That's great. Next question.
This one comes in from Jason Parks in Nashville, Tennessee. Is there a difference between spatial audio and Dolby Atmos?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Dolby Atmos is a proprietary encoding format, and also Dolby Atmos is proprietary encoding format, while spatial audio is this whole catch-all, I believe, term that Apple uses for not only Atmos audio, but also their playback system that simulates binaural and also placement in a binaural space. It's really confusing with how Apple is treating that term.
Yeah. And it's because Apple doing a couple things there. There's some stuff that truly is Atmos, and then there's other things they're doing that is just kind of like, I'm going to take the stereo and make it sound bigger than it was before with a bunch of processing. And so that's two different.
Still call it spatial.
Yeah, but we'll call it spatial because it does feel bigger, in that area. So next question.
Coming in from Douglas Carmichael, the Allen and Heath D Live console supports up to 5.1 panning. Could you mix live Atmos content on it with their surround panner or would you create buses corresponding to parts of the mix and encode those buses into Atmos streams separately?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, that's precisely how a lot of broadcasters are doing it now. They build a 5.1 mix and do sends from specific channels to throw up into the height channels. That's what I meant earlier about Atmos.
Right. Very good. Next question.
Coming in from Marty Atias in Maryland. So speaking of plugins, Dear Reality offers special panning up to 9.1.6 in a VST plugin. Would this be useful for doing Atmos or spatial sound?
I am not familiar with it. Have you seen that at all, Mickey?
No, I have not played around with the Dear Reality stuff. Though I have this Todd Reynolds that introduced me to them. But it looks like its outputs are only channel based. You can only do channel based with them.
Right. Which may be enough. I mean, again, it's there's a lot of things. The one thing to know is that we can talk about objects and beds, but 80-90% of the work is done with, if you have 5.1 or 7.1, 80-90% of the work is done there. So, the last little bit adds a lot to it, but you have to remember that you can get a lot done just in channels. Next question.
Okay, coming in from Douglas Carmichael. The panning modes the DLive console supports are left-right plus mono sum, left-right plus mono, left-center right plus, and 5.1. What panning mode would you use for Atmos encoding?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Absolutely, you'd want to start with 5.1. You'd have a surround bed to begin with, and you can, as you mentioned previously, do a separate stereo bus, or I don't know if you can do a quad bus, but or a pair of stereo buses to do your height channels.
And so in that case, what you're doing is you're to do the height channels, you have to kind of think of it that way and listen and monitor it and listen to it, because you're going left, right when you want to go up, right? I mean, you're panning one direction, but what you're interpreting it as is height.
Yes, precisely. So you'd probably want to do, and you'd most likely be working on it with send. So you'd want to maybe send a bit of the crowd mics up there, a bit of your verbs up there, and you're simulating a surround space or a height space with your sends. And that's why it's important to listen to, of course, be monitoring it actually in Atmos or in immersive, and also, on top of that, it would be better if you listen to it at a decoder instead of what's coming out of the board.
Last comment.
And it is just a comment from Marty Atias in Maryland. He says the link for Dear Reality is www.dear-reality.com.
And for the most part, I'm going to encourage people to put comments in the chat. And so and as opposed to just keep the questions, keep us limited to questions otherwise. So there we go. Made it to the end of the hour. I wasn't sure if that was is there enough questions, but I'm really excited about this. This is, and I think that I know that some of the stuff I'm talking about is pretty far out there. So, but there is a convergence coming between the USDZ that I'm talking about, the surround design that I'm talking about. All of those things are coming as we get into this AR VR world that is coming towards us, but it's still a year, 2 years away. Some of it. The key is to get our head around it before it arrives. Then when opportunity meets preparation. And so we have the opportunity to prepare so that when things start to pop up and there's a demand for it, we already have the skill set, because it just takes time. There'll be a lot of other people scrambling, trying to figure it out. And we have the opportunity as a group to be a little ahead. So anyway, that's the thought process there. Anyway, thanks to the producers for yet another great pile of questions that kept the conversation going. Well done. And thank you to the panelists for sticking around and contributing to a great conversation and keeping us going. All right. Thanks so much. And we'll see you in after hours. Remember, tomorrow we're going to talk about super sources, but really as they relate to office hours. All right. See ya.